everybody. It's so lovely to be with you here today. And yes, no, there are no cards on the table. Uh, there's just me wanting to share a story with you today, something a little bit different, but a true story. And this is all about just something that happened to me, just one thing of many things that have happened to me in my life when it comes to my faith, my trust and faith in the spirit realm, in that I am being guided and that the universe is looking after me and is listening to me. And I feel that's the big thing, that the universe is listening to me. This story began many years ago, and at the time I was trying to build my life again. I was trying to build my life after some disappointments. So I won't go into that, it's not necessary. But I was in a situation where I was starting my own little business up. Now, for those of you who have been to Australia, as you know, I am from Australia. My name is Linda Williams, but I live in Queensland. And for those of you who have been to the Gold Coast, the beautiful Gold Coast of Australia, you will know what I'm talking about when I mention the Carrara markets. So these are massive markets on the Gold Coast where people have their stalls, and some of them, like myself, have little shops inside a gigantic shed, and you can buy all sorts of wonderful things. And so at the time uh, of this beginning, this story, I had actually set myself up in my own little shop inside, that's what they used to call the big shed, selling my jewellery. Because I was in jewellery for many, many years. And so, and I was travelling every Saturday and Sunday to the markets, to my little shop to make my living. Just me on my own. And it was a long drive because at the time I was living about an hour's drive from the market. And so after about a year, I started to get really tired. I was at the time I was renting a lovely little apartment, and I started to nearly fall asleep behind the wheel one afternoon, one Sunday, coming from the market to come home. And I thought, gosh, what am I going to do? And I didn't have a lot of money behind me at the time. And so one day I was sitting at the lights, not just as I came out of the markets, there's a set of lights. I was sitting there waiting for the lights to change. And I looked across and I saw this little village over. It turned out to be an over 50s village. People from 50 onwards live in there. So it's a little community village. As I said, I'm going back a long way now, some years back, and so in those days they were very new in Australia. Those over 50s retirement villages. Now, of course, they're big time here, and I actually live in one now, a retirement village now, which is absolutely gorgeous. But anyway, I looked across and I thought, oh, okay, I must check that out. And so I actually drove there during the week to where I'd have the time, because from Monday to Friday I didn't work. I did my work, I did this. And so I drove there and I thought, I'll go look into this. And as I was driving around, there was three streets. When you drove in, the very first street, and then if you wanted to go to the second street, you'd go to the right and go down that street, and then the third street was the same. So I drove down the first street to the very, very end. And at the very end, I saw a for sale sign on a house that was on the very corner, you see. And this house, it was like a little cottage, was overlooking the Nerang River. It was overlooking the river. And of course, me being a water sign, I thought, oh, look at this. And I took the plunge. I knocked on the door because I've always been cheeky, and the people were home. And I said, "Oh, hello. Is there any chance that I could have a look at the home? I'm sorry to come out of the blue." They said, "No, that's fine. Come on in." They were very nice. And so I went in and into this little cottage. And everybody, I don't know if you've ever experienced falling in love with something straight away, like a house or a car or a piece of jewelry or anything for that matter. But the minute I walked in and I looked out the window and saw the water, I had a feeling in my gut, and I just had this emotional reaction, thinking, "Oh my God, I love this place." And so I started talking to these people, and they told me the price, and the price was more than I had. And so I said, "Oh, I don't know whether I can afford that." And the fellow, the guy, um, he said, "Oh, you've got $1 million views here. So the price is terrific." And he was a tiny little fellow. He was a short little fellow and very tiny. And he sort of had this bit. He had a little bit of an attitude, let's face it. And he was sort of, a little bit like that. Anyway, oh, he had, as far as he was concerned, he had Buckingham Palace on the river. That's how he was talking and so on. And so I said, "Oh, okay." So I said, "Can I bring somebody back to have a look?" They said, "Oh, yeah, sure." The price was way out of my range. However, I've always been somebody that always believed that, surprising how you can negotiate sometimes, you know, and I just couldn't forget this place. I just couldn't get it out of my system. And so I asked a friend who was a builder to come and have a look. And he went all through it. And there was a deck outside. There was a tiny little deck outside. And, in the corner of the deck, it was all rotted underneath. And I found out later that this John, I would call him John, was hopeless at doing anything. He couldn't knock a nail in the wall. And so they'd lived there for 17 years and he'd never done a thing. They'd never done a thing. And so there was quite a lot to be done. And but we went. My friend looked through and told them, "Look, this needs to be fixed. That needs to be fixed. It's got a lot of," and this guy said, "Oh well, you've got to buy something, warts and all that sort of thing," uh, and um, and so we went, and I got in touch with them, and I said I'd like to come and have another talk to you if I could, and this was about a week later. And I went there and I thought, "Oh, I'm going to put in an offer." So I put in an offer. They said, "Oh, he just laughed at me, you see. He just laughed and said, 'Oh, don't be silly.'" And I said, "Well, that's a pretty good offer considering everything that's got to be done." But I said, "Also, your price is 20,000 more than all the other homes." He said, "Oh, yes, but you've got the views and all this and that and so on." And I said, "Well, there are other houses in here with a couple of views that probably wouldn't be asking that." So we had a little bit of a tug of war when it came to conversations. And anyway, I said, "Well, could you let me know that that's my offer?" I made the offer. And I went and they rang me the next day and said, "Oh, we're not accepting your offer." And I'd been there 3 times, and every time I went, I felt more in love with it. I fell more in love with it. I felt this house was meant for me. And I said to a friend of mine, that house is mine. That house is meant for me. It's exactly what I've been looking for. It'll be ideal. I'll be in a community environment, and you pay so much a week for these sorts of these villages. If the rent would have been nothing, and that covered everything. I didn't have to pay rates and water and all that. And they did the gardens. They're really good ideas for people, especially single women. Because let's face it, I'll be honest with you, I wouldn't have a clue how to use a lawnmower. I'm a woman. There's women out there, some of you out there probably saying, "Well, I do that, but I'm not that sort of a woman." So anyway, um, so they refused it, and because I'd been there a few times and fallen in love with this place and looked at it from all angles, I was totally devastated. to say the least. And and for days and days and days, I was screaming at Spirit, saying, why? Why would you take me somewhere? Why would you show me something that I would want so badly and feel was mine? And then I don't get it. What's the idea of this? And of course, I was furious. I was furious with Spirit. I was angry. I was upset. I was devastated. I was so disappointed because I had fallen in love with this modest little cottage that had this beautiful view of the river. And, it was a little two-bedroom place. It was just so cute. It was just, I could see myself in it. And, it was 5 minutes from the market where I had my shop, which was even better. I had to get in my car, drive down the road, and I didn't have to drive an hour at the weekends every Saturday and Sunday anymore. It was just ideal. It was perfect. And so I was upset for a long time. And I went and had a look at another place, another village in an area called Burleigh Heads. And some of you who know the Gold Coast will know where Burleigh Heads is. So I went and had a look at that village, which was much more modern, really beautiful, bigger homes, really lovely, but I couldn't afford it because you can't get a bank loan on a property that you don't own the land, So I had to have the cash. And so I saw some houses in this village in Burleigh Heads that I also liked, but I couldn't get the one out of my head in Nerang. I just couldn't get it out of my head. And so, I had a look there and they were too expensive anyway. And so I couldn't afford them, which was a shame because it was a lovely village. So I forgot about that. So over the weeks, I sort of came to terms with the fact that, oh, well, obviously Spirit has a plan. Because of my belief system, I had to not allow myself to lose faith because Spirit always has a plan. And sometimes, or most of the time, we don't see that plan or it doesn't show itself straight away. And this is what I was trying to tell myself to console myself of the disappointment. I was just trying to talk myself into accepting and believing. And I did believe that Spirit had a plan, but at the same time, I was still very disappointed and felt let down because I always had faith, I always felt that they would look after me and they would help me to get what it is that I really wanted in life because I worked so hard and made an effort with my life because I never wanted things just given to me. I've always worked for what I have. I've always worked hard for what I had. And so the months went by and I came to terms with it. I stayed in my little flat because I don't know, I just couldn't find anything else. My heart wasn't in anything else. My heart had been there. And I think my heart stayed there. And so I just went about things. And 12 months later, and I'd even forgotten that I didn't even look at that village anymore I just drove past it, went to my shop, didn't even give it any thought. I sort of eventually came to terms with that and I put all my faith out there that Spirit would look after me with the belief system that maybe I'm going to win a house or maybe, I just wanted to think positive about it. Anyway, this certain day I was driving out from the from my shop on the Sunday, and I was sitting at the lights again, those same lights that I'd sat at a year earlier, and I looked across. And I thought, I wonder who got that house of mine. I wonder who bought my house. Because I believed, I thought, oh, I'll go find out, I'll go and check it out. But I'm just curious. I wonder who bought it and with what they've done with the garden. I wonder what they've done if they painted it. And this is how I was thinking. So I drove down the street and there it was for sale. I thought, what? It's been a year. And I thought, oh, maybe the people that have bought it, I don't like it here or something. I didn't know what to think. They looked the same. I thought, oh, and then as I got closer, the same car was in the driveway, their car. So I knocked on the door. Cheeky old me. The lady came to the door. And I couldn't help myself. I said, "Oh, you haven't sold your house then?" And she looked very uncomfortable, and I thought, "Oh, golly." And she said, "Oh, no." And I said, "Oh." So, well, I'm still open to giving you that offer. And she said, "I'll come in." And John was in there. And of course, he also looked very uncomfortable. And I said, "Oh, you haven't sold?" I said, "Gee, it's been a year. That's another year of rent you've been paying, isn't it?" And they sort of both looked so uncomfortable. And I thought, oh dear. So I said, "Look, obviously, your price was too high. So I'm quite prepared to offer you that price again that I offered you 12 months ago, if you're open to it." But what I did was I said, "Look, don't answer me today. Give it a few days. Get in touch with me in a few days. I'll just give you my phone number again. So let me know if you're open to it. I've got the money. I've got the money, and we can settle it." You see. And I didn't really have all the money. I was of the offer I was making. I was actually 3,000 short, but I still did it. Because I thought, I'm going to do this. I'm going to get, if I can get this at this price, somehow I'm going to do this. That was how, this is how I think and I feel I'm going to do it. And that's how you get somewhere, because you put it out there, that you're going to create this that you need. Anyway, they rang me the next day and they said, "Oh, we're happy to accept your offer." And I said, "Okay, okay." So we made an appointment for me to go down on the Tuesday to sign the contract and to sign it all and to meet the owner, the management of the park, and to change everything over into my name. But when I finished with that phone conversation with them, I just burst into tears because it had been a year, and all that disappointment and those feelings all came up of how I felt, and all of a sudden my dream was coming true now. So I just burst into tears, and I said, "What was all this about? What's this about for a year? What was meant? What's happened here? I've got this beautiful home, but why?" And Spirit said, "Well, they needed to learn a lesson. They needed to learn a lesson." In that year, I have no idea how many people came to look at their home, but obviously nobody bought it. You got to realize something too. I had taken possession of that house emotionally with my heart. I had said to Spirit, I love this. I love this house. I want this to be my home. I love it. I've fallen in love with it. And so I had taken possession of it with my belief system and in my heart at 12 months earlier. And so I had connected to that house, the energy of that house, and brought that house into my belief system and my energy field. And that's what I'd done. I'd manifested this belief system and this trust and knowing. I just knew it belonged to me. I had no doubts. Many of you out there, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You just know that it's meant to be. But you see, they wouldn't budge on their price. 12 months earlier, they believed that they were going to get that money. And Spirit had to show them that they were wrong. And so when I came up with my offer again, they realised, I think, that, gee, we've been sitting here for 12 months. We can't do what we want to do because of that. We've just paid 12 months rent. And so I got my house. I got my little cottage on the river, and I was so happy there. But it was quite a journey. It was an interesting journey. Uh, my father and my brother came to have a look at it after I bought it, and they said, "Oh boy," my brother said, "Geez, you need some new carpet put in." when you move in? I said, yeah. And the carpet was terrible, because 17 years they hadn't done a thing. And so we got a friend of ours was in the carpet industry, and he'd put carpet down in the house for me. So I got in touch with him, and I decided that I was going to move in um, a week after they moved out so that I could get some things done. Well, honestly, when they moved out, the carpet was so bad, it was terrible. But not only that, the funny thing was, you've got to look at the funny side of something, I guess. But they had all these photos on the wall and they took them down, and there was all these, there was the color of the wall behind the photos was a different color to the wall because the house hadn't been painted in 17 years. So there was all these squares where, they'd hung all these photos. And so my dad said, "Oh my God, look at the walls." He said, "Oh, we're going to have to paint." So I said, "Oh my goodness." So he said, "Oh," and my brother, he said, "Well, we'll paint it for you. We'll get it painted." And so I bought a very pale lemony color. It was beautiful lemony color, and they painted it for me. And so I ended up, the house was painted. They painted it all, and they put all new. I put new carpet down. My dad paid for the carpet, but it was an interesting journey because, as you know, at the time I had my shop in the markets there at Carrara, and that was my only form of income. And when I made the offer to this for this house, I was in fact still a couple of $1,000 short. So what I did was, and I mean, this is just, this is, I guess, the things you do and the things you have to do to survive sometimes. I had a credit card for $5,000 for my business so that I could go up, if I buy any stock anywhere, I could go up to that. And I only had $1,000 on it at the time. So what I did was I put a couple of $1,000 from my credit card into my merchant facility, into my bank account, to make up the money to pay make that final payment for my house. And that weekend that I moved in on the Friday, and that weekend I went to the markets with $90 in my bank account. That's all I had was $90 left in my bank account after I'd paid for this house. And again, I had my credit card was up to $3,000. In those days, it was a lot for a single girl. And that weekend, I had a boomer weekend. I had a boomer. I made $1,800 that weekend. I was just so busy, I couldn't believe it. And it was very unusual. And so everybody, you know what? That's just one story, one story that I can share with you of many where my faith and trust in the universe has paid off. A year before that, I'd said, you know what? When I got home, I was so disappointed I missed out on that house, and I just felt that there was something not right. And I was upset and I was crying and screaming to spirit carrying on. And I said, "Okay, fine. That's it. You've got a plan. I'll give it. You've got a plan for me. So, okay, whatever it is, you know what's best for me. I give you all my trust. I have faith that you'll do the right thing by me. I'll try and let go." you know, when I did finally get their house, and I asked Spirit, and they said, "Well, what the problem wasn't you. The problem was that they couldn't see that they were being unrealistic, and also they were not being fair. They were trying to rip you off. They were not being fair, and so they had to learn. And it wasn't about hurting them. They didn't get hurt. They just learned that they were too expensive to what else was selling in the village, and they weren't being fair because of that. And so they eventually got, they moved to where they wanted to go, and I got what I wanted. And at the end of it all, spirit came through. The universe was protecting me from somebody else's wrongdoing, which is of course a karmic thing. And they will do that if you're in a situation. They know, spirit knows it, the universe knows what it needs to know to protect you, and it knows what's going on everywhere and around you and those who you react with. Spirit and the universe is aware of those who you are around and who you interact with, and they will try and protect you from being deceived or betrayed or hurt. And they protected me very much so. And the funny end started, the funny outcome of all of this? I was in that house for about 3 to 4 years, very happy. One day I had a lady knock on the door, and her and her husband, and she said, "Hello. I was just wondering, my name's Shirley. I was just wondering, are you interested in selling this house?" And I said, "Oh, I don't know." She said, "Because I'd like to move into this village and I love your house." She was a water sign as well. And we had a discussion, and so on and so forth. And they came back a few days later, and I found out that they lived in that village at Burley Heads where I'd looked. And she said, "How would you like to swap? How would you like to swap houses?" I said, "Oh, I don't know about that." She said, "Well, you'll still be in a community, but she wanted to live a couple of doors up from her daughter who just lost her daughter. And she wanted to be close to give her daughter some support." So I put a lot of thought into it, and she said, "Come and have a look at my house." Wow, it was absolutely beautiful. It was all brand new. She'd gutted it and spent like $80,000, put a new kitchen, new bar. It was absolutely new bathroom, white tiles all the way through, a big fountain outside. It was on a corner. It was one of the most beautiful homes in the village. It was worth a lot more than mine. And she said, "What do you think?" I said, "Oh my God, this is beautiful." She said, "Well, we they had plenty of money. It wasn't." Anyway, long story short, I ended up in that beautiful village in Burley Heads with a beautiful, beautiful, brand new, beautifully renovated house. It was absolutely gorgeous. A lock-up garage. It had everything. I was very happy there, and that's what it led to. So that led to that house that I couldn't afford almost. Isn't it funny how things turn out? Isn't it funny? But all of this has been a very true story. I don't make stories up. So please never give up. Never give up on your dreams. Never, ever doubt that the universe is trying to bring those things into your life that you've asked for. And remember this, it's a timing thing. And you've also got to have faith and trust that sometimes what you're asking for is only going to do you harm. But maybe you don't see that at the time. And that's why the spirit realm may take you in a different direction, away from that you think you need or you think you want, because would only be destructive to you. So trust and have faith that they will always give you what you ask for if it's the right thing for you, if it's going to help you to be happy, and if it's the right time. If it doesn't happen when you ask for it, just put it out there and say, "It's up to you. You know what's best for me. I will accept whatever you bring, and I will be grateful for that." So never lose faith that you are being watched over, you're being guided, and you're being cared for. So take care, everybody. As you know, we usually come every 3 or 4 days and we do some stories, or some guidance. I beg your pardon. We give you guidance channel through from Spirit. That's what we normally do on this channel. But I have had a lot of interesting things happen to me in my life. And so have you? I'd love to hear from you. Have you also had an experience where your faith was very much tested and you put your trust in the universe? And would you like to share that with us? Or maybe you'd like to tell everybody or become a part of helping others to have faith and trust in spirit, helping them to learn that if you do that, that you will be okay. Take care. It's lovely to be with you today. All my love.